Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Monday, the 6th day of May, 2024. And we have stories again coming across the wire late last night, early this morning that you need to know about. In fact, my Red Alert app, which shows rocket attacks in Israel, showed 45 different attacks overnight. So it continues. Well, our headlines basically say this. It looks like the campaign in Rafah is starting. The IDF is beginning to evacuate people from the area, the citizens of Gaza, so there won't be in harm's way when the attack starts. There was a terrible bombing yesterday at Rafah area that killed 4 Israeli soldiers and harmed about a dozen others. And that's really kind of put any kibosh on negotiations. In fact, the National Security Advisor of Israel said the Rafah Op is a sure thing. Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is living on borrowed time. Then what we're going to do, we have 3 headlines today. Basically where last day's Bible prophecy really fits in. Sign 21 of our 25 signs, we're near the end. There'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel. We picked 3 headlines out of literally dozens we could have chosen from. Anti-Semitism surging, report finds prompting fear for future of Jewish life in the West. Another headline, and listen to this. Pro-Hamas protester funded by whom? Biden's own political donors. No wonder he doesn't want any investigations into these problems on campus, all these encampments that are going on there. They're funded by his own political donors. That's a Breitbart story. We'll talk about that. And then anti-Israel protesters prepare to stay for the summer. Nothing will deter us, they say. This is precisely what we're talking about. And here's what we have. What we have here is basically sign number 21 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. And that is there'll be the rise in anti-Semitism. The whole world will be against Israel. And it's precisely what we're seeing. So if there's one thing taking place right now that's really fulfilling Bible prophecy, it's this. Because remember, at the time of the end, there won't be anybody that's a friend of Israel in the entire world. But that just doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. And the seeds are being sown right now as we're going to talk about these 3 stories. Now, in the last 2 days, what we've done, events have warranted breaking news to be done twice. And we're going to start doing this every day now. We're going to continue today. Instead of doing your Bible questions answered, I'm going to do another edition of breaking news, probably afternoon sometime here, 1 o'clock Pacific time. It's about 5:30, 5:40 in the morning here on the Pacific coast when we're doing this first one. And we'll do another one about 6, 7 hours because there's so many stories going on. I had to choose from about a dozen stories just to give you these. And we want to keep it, 15 minutes or less, if at all possible, what we do here. We know you're all busy, don't want to take too much of your time, but we want you to be informed with what's going on. So this is what's going to be happening. Thank you for telling people about what we do here, sharing it, because what we do is something very different than anyone else. We do the headlines, but we always explain how they fit with last day's Bible prophecy. Then we have our website, Educating Our World, which documents all that. 65 free books in PDF form, a dozen on Bible prophecy, all there explaining all the intricacies of what's going to take place in the last days. All right, let's look at the headlines. Headline number 1, IDF begins its evacuations of Rafah, begin moving the Palestinian population from the eastern neighborhoods of Rafah to a humanitarian zone. They've done this Monday morning, according to Israeli media reports. So starting. Headline number 2 from an Egyptian source, Hamas fire on the Kerem Shalom crossing, harm talks for ceasefire. As though they needed any more harm from Hamas's side. A high-ranking Egyptian official told the Egyptian periodical channel that Hamas's missile attack on the Kerem Shalom crossing in southern Israel has harmed negotiations for a ceasefire prisoner swap deal. The Sunday afternoon attack was horrible, left 4 Israeli soldiers dead, 10 others injured. The source added that Egypt's security delegation is increasing its efforts to prevent escalation between Hamas and Israel. Afraid that's a little too late now. Netanyahu's office issued a statement because he was getting blamed for the problem with the lack of progress in negotiations. The claim that Prime Minister Netanyahu and not Hamas torpedoed the hostage release deal is a complete lie and is intentionally misleading the public, and that's true. The truth is the exact opposite. Hamas are the ones who torpedoed every deal by refusing to budge a millimeter from its extreme demands that any Israeli government in Israel would be unable to accept. And what is that? First and foremost, that Israel completely withdraw from Gaza, end the war, something which would allow Hamas to renew its military control of Gaza and reorganize for the next October 7th as it's promised to do. Israel will not allow that to happen. Remember, still Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel. Which leads us to our third headline. The National Security Advisor says the Rafah Op is a sure thing. Sinwar is living on borrowed time. His name's Chachi Hanegbi. I won't try and pronounce that again. He indicated Saturday that the IDF has in recent months nearly caught Gaza's chief and Hamas's Gaza chief, Yahya Sinwar. At the same time, he said Sinwar was delaying a hostage and truce deal because he was in distress. It's hard for him because a decision on a hostage deal is likely to mean the end of Hamas's rule, meaning the end of his rule, and likely the end of his life. And that's why he's not wanting to give up. This is a card he wants to play sometime, the hostage card. He keeps delaying things, but enough is enough. Hanegbi says Sinwar is living on borrowed time. Israel has come close to eliminating him in recent months, and he won't emerge alive from this confrontation, a prospect which the Wall Street Journal recently reported that does not bother the Hamas chief, believing that he's already won the war. Well, we'll see if it really doesn't bother him that his life will end. His fate is sealed, but we must be patient, Hanegbi told Channel 12, noting that it took the U.S. a decade to catch 9/11 mastermind Osama bin Laden. And so we will see. So it looks like the op is a sure thing unless something miraculous happens, some type of agreement, which does not seem likely. All right, now for the headlines we're most concerned about, because these are the specific ones that fits what last day's Bible prophecy is all about. And this is the whole idea of anti-Semitism, Israel being isolated from the world, Israel in the last days having basically no friends in the world. This is what's going on. Headline number 4. Anti-Semitism surging, report finds prompting fear for future of Jewish life in the West. Interesting. The U.S. saw a 103% increase in incidents fueled by Gaza war. A global report for 2023 shows, while France stands out with nearly quadrupling of anti-Semitic incidents in its country. This was basically, it says, if the current trends continue, could threaten the very ability to lead Jews, to allow Jews to live in the West. And that's why we had that story the other day, if you recall, this call from one of the op-ed pieces in one of the Israeli periodicals telling the Jews around the world, come to Israel. It's the only place you're going to be safe, even with all the problems there, because you're going to be attacked in basically every Western country now because of the anti-Semitism that's rearing its ugly head. And so the article goes on to say that, France was the highest, but it's going to threaten, if the current trends continue, the ability of Jews to even live in the West. This is from the Tel Aviv University, the Anti-Defamation League. It also highlighted the anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses, which is the head of the ADL, called the most alarming aspect of the surge of Jew hatred in the United States. In the United States, the tally more than doubled of incidents. Canada, the increase doubled. The UK, it almost tripled. And in Italy, it doubled. So he said, now this is what's interesting. The year is not 1938 or 1933, the professor said. Now, let's remind you that those were the years where the anti-Semitism started in Germany, where Hitler started separating the Jews, specifically pointing them out as the cause of all the problems in Germany, and promised the master race. Remember, the Aryan race would take over, but you got to get rid of these inferiors, and the Jews were among them. That's when they started wearing the yellow insignia. And that's where the word ghetto actually comes from. Well, it actually comes earlier. The Jews lived in ghettos there where they would be marked off by identified as Jews. And of course, eventually they were hauled away to the death camps, as we see. And so it's not that yet, but it's getting there. This professor said he's the head for this Center of the Study of Contemporary European Jewry. Here's what he said. It's not 38 or 33 yet. Yet, if current trends continue, and believe me, they will, the curtain will descend on the ability to live Jewish lives in the West, to wear a Star of David, attend synagogues and community centers, send kids to Jewish schools, frequent a Jewish club on campus, or speak Hebrew. And this is exactly what it's coming to. In his essay on the report, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL, called the proliferation of anti-Semitism on U.S. universities' campuses the most alarming aspect of the national surge of Jew hatred after October 7th. We've seen instances where Jewish students have barricaded themselves in a library because a pro-Palestinian mob was outside. We have heard stories of students being afraid to cross their campuses at night for fear of being attacked, or attending Shabbat dinners at their Hillels with armed guards posted at the door, wrote Greenblatt. These and other events on U.S. campuses, he added, mean that the Jewish community is facing a crisis unseen in generations. And again, this is the sign. Remember, one of our 25 signs, the uptick of anti-Semitism. At the time of the end, the Jews are isolated. Now, this story is pathetic, this next one, but not surprising. The pro-Hamas protests, guess what? They're funded by Joe Biden's own political donors. This is a story from Joel Pollack and Breitbart, if you want to read it yourself. The pro-Palestinian anti-Semitic protests on university campuses across the nation are funded by Joe Biden's own political donors, which could explain why he hesitates to condone them and won't investigate them. Remember what Biden told Netanyahu, what Blinken told Netanyahu? If you go into Rafah, we will not support you. In fact, we may do some sanctions against you. Biden has threatened that, to sanction Israel for basically wanting to defend themselves. Well, now we find out maybe one of the reasons why he doesn't want to deal with them doing this. He also equivocated last month, if you recall, when asked to react to the protests, saying that he condemned the anti-Semitism, but he also condemned those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians. And that puzzled a lot of observers. What in the world is he talking about? Research by the NGO Monitor and others into donors behind the protest have turned up familiar names from the Democratic Party bankroll, including George Soros' own Open Society Foundations and other liberal philanthropies. Biden's Department of Justice has notably refused to investigate the civil rights abuses committed by the encampments against Jews, journalists, and others, and refused to consider racketeering conspiracy charges against them, because as we're going to talk about later today, the people that are doing this are professional agitators. They cross borders, they cross states to do this purposely, and that would fall under the RICO Act, racketeering, and when you cross state lines to do felonious acts. So anyway, but they're not, his Department of Justice isn't investigating that. Now, as Caroline Glick notes, which we mentioned here, our favorite writer at the Jewish News Syndicate, Biden has been obsessing over losing Arab and Muslim American votes in Michigan, but there may be more Jewish votes to lose in key swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and others. In other words, what he takes with one, gives with one, he takes away with the other. And that's what's going on. The Jewish people are having second thoughts, as we talked about yesterday in one of our stories about supporting the Democrat Party, but what we're doing with Israel. And finally, headline number 6, and this is why we're emphasizing this: anti-Israel protesters prepared to stay put for the summer. Nothing will deter us. And that's exactly what we predicted. That's exactly what's going to happen. As many universities and colleges around the nation are preparing for summer break and commencement ceremonies, anti-Israel protesters show no signs of giving up. Several protesters told the Politico, it's the online liberal left-wing political magazine, easy to say, they're not giving up. They're not giving up, these protesters, even with summer approaching and as several anti-Israel encampments on university campuses have been cleared. Adding, now listen to this, there is nothing that will deter them from continuing to protest as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. Now, especially if Israel goes into Rafah, like we assume they are going to do. Here's what they say. There's a genocide going on in Gaza. There's nothing that will deter us from doing everything we can do to end it, said Ryan Merceau-Gard, a senior at the University of Michigan. He told the outlet, the movement is not a flash in the pan, but it's here to stay, and will stay until we achieve divestment, as happened with the South African anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s and so many others. I don't have any expectation that things are going to slow down, he said. Both locally, state, and nationally, there is a valid and continued pressure on politicians to respond to Palestine, and there's a lot that can happen between now and November, and I hope folks are paying attention to it. Well, okay, well, this is what's going on. That last statement, by the way, was from one of the educators that was responding to this and says, we don't see any slowdown during the summer on our campuses. All right, so here's what it all means. Sign number 21. Number 25 signs, we're near the end. That's from our book that's on our website, Educating Our World. It's a free download from the website under the heading of Bible Prophecy, along with 11 other books that deal with this subject. Sign 21, there'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel. This is the biblical prediction. And like we say, we've mentioned a number of signs of the last days that pertain to the modern state of Israel. Unhappily, the next sign is seen far too often in our world today, anti-Semitism. And we quote specifically Zechariah chapter 12, verses 3 and 4. Listen to what the Lord says. I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem a movable rock for all nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. Zechariah 12, 3 and 4. Now, notice two things are mentioned here. Specifically, the surrounding people, the nations in the region that are against Israel, but also all the nations of the earth are against Israel. And this is what's going to take place at the time of the end. And like we said, this takes time to develop in the world, and that's what's happening right now with the rise of anti-Semitism. So if there's one sign that we're seeing now, it's not Ezekiel 38, 39 battle, it's not Psalm 83, it's not Isaiah 17, which neither of those are last days predictions. We'll talk about those more. We've already mentioned that. In our book, 45 Common Mistakes About Last Days Bible Prophecy Cleared Up. The real big story from October 7th is this. Israel being attacked, Israel being the victim, and yet it's turned around where Israel now is the bad guy, the aggressor, and anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head, and not nary a way that we've seen since the 1930s in Nazi Germany. So stay tuned. Like we said, we'll come at you again another 6 hours from now or so and bring you the updates. There's other stories we want to get to also. Continue to pray, continue to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and don't, remember, we know how this is going to turn out. Christ is going to come back. He's going to set up his kingdom, and we're going to live with him forever and ever and ever. That's the good news. The bad news is it's going to be really bad before all that happens in our world. Jesus talked about these perilous times. All right. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later on another edition of Breaking News. Until then, may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.